Look at this animal. It sleeps on your furniture. It has a name. It has, statistically, a birthday party. It will lose a fight to a cucumber. And it descends directly, unbroken, no detours, from a predator that spent tens of thousands of years treating your ancestors as competition. Not friends, not partners, competition. For the same meat, on the same land, during the coldest, hungriest stretch in modern human history. We tell this story like a love story. Lonely humans, cold wolf, warm fire, everybody hugs, credits roll. That story is wrong. Not slightly wrong. Wrong in the direction, wrong in the timeline, and wrong about who wanted this. Because for roughly 20,000 years, the animal that became your dog wanted absolutely nothing to do with you. Let's get one thing out of the way, because the comment section is already typing. For most of that 20,000 years, they weren't dogs. They were wolves. That's not a technicality. That's the entire story. Dog isn't a starting point. Dog is the finish line. Domestication is the 20,000-year process of turning something that would happily strip a carcass down to bone into something that will hold that same bone and look at you for approval before chewing it. So when I say dogs hated humans, I mean it precisely. The ancestral animal, the wolf lineage that eventually produced every golden retriever, every chihuahua, every dog you have ever loved, spent the overwhelming majority of that shared history avoiding us, competing with us, and occasionally being killed by us. The question this whole video is built around is simple and genuinely strange. How did that ever change? To understand why this took so long, you need to understand what humans and wolves actually were to each other. They were the same job applicant. Both are pack hunters. Both are endurance hunters. Both target large hoofed animals. Reindeer, horses, bison. Both are highly social, highly coordinated, highly territorial. Both are smart enough to hold a grudge. If you were a wolf on the Ice Age steppe, humans were not a mysterious new species to be curious about. Humans were the other guys. The other guys who show up at your kill. The other guys who claim the same valley. The other guys who follow the same herd you've been tracking for 3 days. Now add the worst possible timing. Around 26,000 years ago, the planet entered the Last Glacial Maximum, the coldest, driest, most brutal phase of the last ice age. Ice sheets pushed south, grassland shrank. Prey animals became scarcer and more scattered. This is the exact window where the wolf to dog story is supposed to be beginning. So, the popular version of events. Cold, lonely humans generously sharing their surplus food with a nervous wolf has a problem. There was no surplus. This was the hungriest era either species had faced. Nobody was sharing. Sharing was how you died. And we have physical evidence of what that relationship actually looked like. At Ice Age sites across Europe, archaeologists find wolf bones bearing cut marks, the signature of a stone tool separating a pelt from a body. Wolves were being skinned. Wolves were being processed. That is not a friendship. That is an inventory. Now, some of you are thinking, hang on, wild wolves are actually pretty shy of people. Documented wolf attacks are rare. Isn't this whole war framing a bit dramatic? Fair objection. And the answer makes the story worse, not better. Yes, modern wolves avoid humans. That avoidance is precisely the point. Wolves that were bold around humans across the last 20,000 years had a strong tendency to stop existing. What you're observing in a modern wolf is not natural indifference. It's the surviving output of a very long, very one-sided filter. The wolves that got close got killed. The wolves that kept their distance had puppies. And here's the part that reframes everything. That same trait. How close will you get to a human before you flee is the exact trait that domestication had to overcome. Biologists call it flight distance. It's not about aggression. It's about tolerance. To become a dog, a wolf didn't need to become friendly. It needed to become slightly less afraid than the wolf standing next to it. That is a much smaller change. It is also an unbelievably slow one, because for thousands of years, being less afraid of humans was a fantastic way to get skinned. So how do we actually know any of this? 3 lines of evidence, and they get progressively harder to argue with. 1. The genetics. Dog and wolf DNA diverged somewhere in the range of 20 to 40,000 years ago, but, and this matters, a genetic split is not a handshake. It marks the moment one wolf population stopped freely interbreeding with the others. That population may have been drifting toward the edges of human camps for thousands of years before anything you'd call a dog existed. The genes record the beginning of a long, awkward, unofficial arrangement, not the friendship. 2. The contested bones. At sites like Goyekave in Belgium and Predmosty in the Czech Republic, researchers have found canid skulls dating back 30,000 years and more, with shortened snouts and broader brain cases, features that lean dog. Some researchers call these Paleolithic dogs. Others call them a wolf population that happen to look unusual. I'm not going to pretend that debate is settled, because it isn't. But notice the shape of it. Even the most generous reading of these bones gives us animals hovering at the edge of human life for tens of thousands of years without ever quite crossing over. 20,000 years of almost. 3. The one nobody argues about. And then there's a site in Germany that ends the debate, and it does something no bone fragment has any business doing. It breaks your heart. In 1914, quarry workers near Bonn, Germany, uncovered a grave. Inside were 2 humans, a man in his 40s, a woman in her 20s. They had been buried together roughly 14,200 years ago, laid out with care, with red ochre and worked objects placed alongside them. And buried with them, deliberately, not dumped, not discarded, was a dog. For decades, the animal was cataloged and largely set aside. Then, in 2018, a team re-examined the remains in detail, and what they found changed what the grave means. The dog was a puppy, around 7 months old when it died, and its teeth carried the damage signature of canine distemper, a viral disease that, in the Ice Age, without medicine, without fluids, without anything, is essentially a death sentence. The tooth damage indicated the puppy had gone through multiple episodes of severe illness over a period of weeks. A 7-month-old puppy with distemper cannot hunt. It cannot follow a moving camp. It cannot regulate its own temperature. It can barely stand. Left alone in Ice Age Europe, it survives a day, maybe 2. This one survived for weeks, which means somebody kept it warm, somebody gave it water, somebody cleaned it repeatedly, because distemper is not a dignified illness. Somebody carried it, and whoever did that got nothing out of it. No hunting help, no protection, no warning bark. This animal was pure cost. Weeks of labor during an ice age for an animal that could not contribute anything and probably wasn't going to make it. They did it anyway. And when the puppy died, they didn't discard it, they kept it. And eventually, it was placed in the ground with 2 people, arranged as one of them. 20,000 years of competition, 20,000 years of cut marks and kept distance and mutual suspicion. And then 14,000 years ago, somebody stayed up nights with a sick puppy that was never going to pay them back. That's the moment. That's where the war ends. Not in a hunt, not in a bargain, in somebody deciding a dying animal was worth the trouble. Here's what makes this genuinely weird though. This wasn't a one-way deal. Both species walked out of it changed. Dogs got smaller brains than wolves relative to body size, which sounds like an insult, but it's really a receipt. Brain tissue is metabolically expensive. When you no longer have to solve the problem of finding your own food, you stop paying for the equipment that solved it. Dogs outsourced survival to us. We are, in a very real sense, part of their nervous system. They also picked up something wolves don't have. Research on facial anatomy has identified a small muscle around dogs' eyes, one that's absent or barely present in wolves, that lifts the inner eyebrow. It produces that specific expression, the one that gets a dog onto the couch it was banned from. That look wasn't designed by dogs. It was selected by us because we kept choosing the animals that could produce it. We built that face. We are the reason it exists, and it is used against us daily. And it goes both ways. Research on humans and dogs looking at each other has found rising oxytocin, the bonding hormone, in both species. The same chemical loop that runs between a parent and an infant. Two former competitors accidentally hijacked each other's parenting wiring. They didn't just join us, they got inside the system. So back to this animal. 20,000 years of avoiding us. 20,000 years of cut marks, competition, and cold distance. An entire ice age spent on the opposite side of the fire. And all that ended, as far as we can tell, not because of a clever hunting strategy or a good trade, but because somewhere in Ice Age Germany, somebody looked at a sick puppy that was worth nothing to them and decided to stay up with it anyway. Every dog alive is downstream of that decision. We didn't win the war with wolves. We ended it by being unreasonably soft at the exact right moment. And the animal on your couch is the receipt. Comment below with what your dog is doing right now. Because whatever it is, it's a direct result of a 14,000-year-old act of kindness that made absolutely no strategic sense. This is Fang and Flint signing off. See you in the next one.